So first, wanted to say thank you very, very, very much for being here today. Thank you so much for everything you've had to endure these last several months as citizens, as businesses, as first responders, as employees, as employers, as community members, as family members, as loved ones. From the bottom of my heart, I just commend you for the sense of community that I have seen every day in the big and little actions that we are doing. It is just so impressive, and it's so hopeful to me. And I know that because of these actions, not only is our city going to get through this, but we are going to be a much closer and a much better community in spite of this stuff. So today I really wanted to kind of share with you some kind of big picture things, sort of how are we helping, how will we reopen, and we've got a bunch of questions that were already submitted previously, so I'm going to answer those questions, and then we'll open it up to you all to questions that you submit right now. So with that, just want to get into sort of how we as a city are helping right now. You know, when this first started to come about, we really wanted to see about what can we do as a city besides just maintaining, you know, critical and essential services, but what can we do out in the community to really help those who are most in need. And we looked at who's most vulnerable, and those who are our lower income residents, those who are our seniors, and also those who are our small businesses. Those are the sort of big buckets, if you will, of folks who have been directly impacted that we could somehow help. And so earlier in the month of April, we created a community and economic relief program. And that program is providing funding to help. It's very targeted, and it's to organizations that are already in existence. I think one of the challenges, of course, is that, you know, we want to be able to help folks as fast as possible. And the fastest way is to go ahead and already help provide funding to those organizations that are already in existence to get funds to those who are most in need. And so that's what we've done as a city, over almost up to about $200,000 we've set aside. And I'm happy to report that we're seeing impacts of that. So for example, the Edmonds Food Bank, which is, by the way, has seen their numbers almost double the amount of people who are lining up for the food bank. They're able to buy a refrigeration truck. They're able to provide fresher food now. They're able to provide more food now because of the support that our city has provided. From the Edmonds Senior Center, we're able to help support connecting seniors to making sure that they are getting food, they're getting counseling, and they're not have to expose themselves as much because we really all want to maintain that stay safe, stay home order right now to keep particularly those who are most vulnerable. And right now, our seniors are absolutely those. They comprise of almost 10,000 people in our city. And so we really need to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to make sure that they aren't any more exposed to this virus than they already are. And then another portion of that is going to really acknowledge the challenges of our small businesses. You know, when the government has closed small businesses, it was really having obviously an impact on them. And so is there a way that we can offset that impact to not only because of a result of these closures, because of this virus, but also acknowledging the role that they help in our community and particularly our economy and in our city to function. And so we partnered with the Chamber of Commerce, and we have, they've already had in existence these WISH grants, and they were at that time up to $500. So we've expanded those WISH grants to now up to $1,000. And today we have approximately 35 businesses that have benefited from these WISH grants. And these grants, what they do is they provide direct funding for a business to hire another Edmonds business. And these businesses will provide help for these businesses to social media, online transactions, web design, legal services, financial planning, all the things that you need to not only be able to either help maintain your business during this crisis, but also to survive once we are able to reopen. And what can we do to what can they do to hit the ground running? And so very, very proud with that program and partnering with the Chamber. I want to get into now sort of how we reopen. I think that's obviously probably the biggest question that everybody's asking. when will we reopen actually is probably the first question. And then the second question is how will we reopen? And I think you really, first we have to address how will we reopen before we can just reopen. We've created a reopening task force, and they're looking at a lot of the sort of big picture questions. What is it going to look like for you as the consumer? What is it going to look like for you as a, as a customer, and for you as an owner? If you as a business owner, how are we going to communicate that information? How are we going to enforce it? For our small businesses, what is that going to look like? And so those are kind of the sort of the big picture questions. Something that I've asked us to look into is, when we do get some guidance as far as the reopening and what that looks like, we want to make sure first and foremost that it's done safely. We want to make sure that people are safe. And that's always been my priority during this entire crisis, is that making sure that people are safe. And it's real important when we reopen our businesses that they're safe, that they have a safe experience. We know right now there are businesses that have reopened in other states and people don't feel safe and they're not going to them. And that's not something we can have in our city or want in our city. So we've got to make sure we do that right. One way to help with that is for us as a city to provide technical guidance and assistance to those businesses out there who are kind of really trying to look for others for help and guidance as far as how we're going to do this. So we're looking at basically bringing on some support from the medical community to provide that kind of medical assistance. Because it's one thing to say, we need to all practice social distancing, but it's another thing to go into some particular business, a restaurant or a hairstylist, and say, how is that going to work in your business? How are you going to limit the amount of customers? How are you going to provide that safe experience? So we hope to be able to provide that sort of opportunity down the road. But those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. Those are the kind of things we're planning. We're going to take some little baby steps, and we're starting that, for example, with the garden, the farmer's market, which is going to be coming May 9th. And I kind of sort of compare that to an outdoor grocery store. And that's why it's already allowed to be open. It's considered an essential business, but we're making sure, and we're partnering with the health district and the Edmonds Museum, who's the primary organization who helps organize this, to make sure that it's a completely safe experience. And so they've already submitted plans to the health district. The health district's already approved those plans, and the criteria of limiting how many people are in there, the types of things that are being sold there, food, for example, the things that are being sold there, not arts and crafts, the spacings of it. It's going to be hopefully a very safe experience. And so it's kind of, we're going to make sure that's really successful, because that's going to be what we're going to try to do with other places, and making sure we have all the sort of social distancing and safety measures in place. Construction, you heard that the governor just announced, recently about sort of, and what that means for Edmonds. What are we going to do? How are we going to provide that kind of guidance to those as we start to reopen these construction sites? And our city staff is already working on that very closely. Some of the challenges that we're seeing already, for example, is how do we provide, running water? They need to have wash stations. Those are becoming hot commodities. And so our public works department has already been creative in thinking about ways to offer running water on some of these properties, so they can continue to work safely. And I think that kind of collaboration is how we're going to get through this. So my hat's off to them. Parks. Yesterday we heard from the governor about opening of parks, right? So let's see. I imagine one area people have a lot of interest in is the fishing pier. The fishing pier, I don't know if folks realize this, can get a lot of visitors, a ton of visitors. And right now it's closed. However, we're looking at reopening the pier around the same time that all the other parks are going to be reopening at the state level. And we're looking at making sure that we have wash stations in place, that we're having good social distancing guidance and signs in multiple languages, that we're having demarcations, so we have appropriate spacing, and really going to be focusing heavy emphasis on education and compliance. So stay tuned for how we're going to reopen that, but it's going to be around May 5th. It will be opening the fishing pier. And we're going to look at other parks as well. We've closed down some of the parking lots to Marina Beach and Brackett's Landing. So we're looking at a little bit farther down the road, opening those up. But also at the same time, we want to make sure that we're not having those places become places of congregation. So we don't want to have too many people there. We also want to make sure that those who have mobility issues have priority. So we're going to be providing more accessible parking at these parking lots. We're going to be adding additional accessible parking in these parking lots. And which then kind of leads to the next question, which is enforcement. So we're going to have some of these social distancing things in place. How are we going to enforce these things? And I've been talking with our police chief, and right now what we have been doing is again, thank you to all of you. What has been working is primarily voluntary compliance. So it really requires all of our residents, all of our visitors to make sure that they are staying and practicing social distancing. Our law enforcement folks are out there. They do receive complaints, particularly if there's any kind of large gatherings of people, and they have been contacting folks and asking them to disperse, and people have been dispersing. And we're going to continue to do that. And we're going to have a presence and to make sure that people are in compliance. But again, it's primarily going to be based on compliance from all of you, and you will just need everyone's help to keep out and look out for everybody, okay? Financial impacts to the city. That's another thing, another area a lot of people have, we've been hearing some questions about, we've been having to address. So right now, I just want to share with everybody that we are currently projecting a 9.2% drop in revenue for the general fund. And we've already implemented about $1.5 million in savings from hiring freezes and from pausing non-essential projects. We look to bring to the council and work with the council in the coming weeks more about sort of these financial projections. And we also looking at ways that we can, continue to plan and prepare for. These are only projections, I should add, and these are projections that we're updating, visiting on a monthly basis. We have very strong fund balances. We've always been a very lean city. We probably have one of the most lower employee counts per capita of any comparable sized city in the area. We've been preparing for a recession as a city long before COVID-19 came. We're actually at a fairly strong place compared to many, many other cities. And, my hat goes off to the city staff who's been here for a long time working on this, to former Mayor Dave Erling, to the city council members who've been here before and now, all who have collectively made that kind of decisions to get us where we are today. And so I'm very optimistic moving forward. What those means moving forward is I think we're going to be just fine for this year. I think the big question is for 2021, and looking at that budget and looking at what kind of projects we need to prioritize, what kind of projects we need to put on hold, what kind of projects we need to cancel, and any other things up and under the sun we need to look at, and where we're going to need community input on is really going to come down to the 2021 budget and beyond. So stay tuned for that kind of involvement and collaboration as we move forward on the budget and just on the funding of the city. Okay, so I think I hit on most of the things. Oh wait, hang on here. So one area I'm happy to share, this is definitely news, is the governor announced earlier today the CARES grant, which stands for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And basically it provides critical expenses for COVID-19 emergencies, including for staffing, procurement of medical supplies, equipment for healthcare, and actually a pretty broad area of things that are disaster related to the COVID-19 crisis. I got off the phone with the governor's office earlier today, and I'm happy to announce that City of Edmonds will be receiving $1.26 million in this disaster aid. There will be a hold by about 10 days for the state legislature per the state law. But in approximately 10 days or so, then it will most likely move forward to us. So stay tuned for more details on that. We're still getting that, but I just wanted to share that number to everybody right away. All right, let's go ahead and I will try to tackle questions that were already submitted. There we go. All right, so from Richard Bologna, with approximately 2,500 reported cases of COVID-19 virus in Snohomish County, how are you satisfied with the healthcare community is doing a good job of keeping up? I think they're doing the best they can. This is something that we've not ever had to deal with, this kind of virus, and considering of the lack of structure that is in place for something like this and having to work with what we have, I think they're doing the best job that we can, and we've been in close collaboration with them. Overall, you know, we're tracking these. They're tracking these numbers, and the numbers are definitely dropping. And I think those are all very encouraging signs. From Guy and Patty, it says here, if we're all in this together, why isolate Edmonds as a community, not in sync with surrounding cities? I think what we're, you know, is most important is that we're in sync with what the health district and with what the state public health folks are in terms of guiding for the stay home, stay healthy order. We've been doing that. We've been taking directions from those folks, and it's made a difference. There's a reason that I believe our county is doing well because we took action, and we took action as early as we could, and those advice and guidance was correct. So let's see, boat owner. I have a boat and dry storage facility at the Port of Edmonds. I'm hoping that my excitement was not misplaced this afternoon when I heard Governor Inslee state in a press conference that recreational boating restrictions will be eased on May 5th. I'm hoping this will mean that the dry storage facility will resume service on that date. If you have been stuck in cramped quarters, I'd rather be aboard my boat than in my office. I hear you. Can you provide any info on my questions? According to the Port of Edmonds, has information on its site that appears there will be limited marina operations for tenants starting May 1. So I would definitely contact and follow up with the Port of Edmonds as far as more details on that. Will the Edmonds Cemetery host a Memorial Day event? Unfortunately, Memorial Day event is canceled due to the coronavirus outbreak, but the cemetery will be open to those to visit on Memorial Day. From the Beacon, has the mayor and any of the city's top directors considered taking a pay cut as a symbolic nod to all those who've been forced to do the same? The New Zealand Prime Minister took a temporary voluntary cut of 20%. As I've indicated earlier, our city is in a very strong financial position. However, all options are on the table, and if circumstances require a change, we're happy to explore all options. Mike McCurry, has there been any discussion with the Port of Edmonds leadership to allow some rent reductions and forgiveness for their many tenants for the current and coming months or shutdown period? The Port has very limited debt and very large cash position. I've been very disappointed. Not heard any proactive programs discussions. I've actually heard rumors of tenants getting, there's a lot going on here. But generally speaking, may the Port have already a program in place. I feel rent forgiveness is the best option. Many small local and family owned businesses in Harbor Square, Commercial Park, in great need of some relief. The Port has vast resources to be generous during this crisis. What I can say is that the Port is, is a separate entity. They have their own elected body, the Port Commissioners. For what I understand, they did vote in support of rent deferrals for the Port Harbor Square tenants, and for a 25% of those have signed up. I can say for the city of Edmonds, we have done rent forgiveness and rent reduction, particularly, for example, at our Francis Anne Center tenants. That was something our city council had approved. So we are actually doing rent forgiveness and rent reductions. What role will the community play in deciding the budget priorities? And it's right now, as I've mentioned, we're focusing on critical services and what we can do to make sure that what we're projecting and is accurate, and also really focusing on the 2021 budget. And there goes my light, so we're going to do this here. This is the motion thing. Okay. And so really, I think that the priority is going to be getting citizen involvement in the 2021 budgeting process. But we're always open as a city. I'm always open, and hopefully, as the restrictions with the health guidance provides it, I'll start to go back to having some of these neighborhood meetings in small groups with each and all of you to get your input. I think it's always important to get citizen input on all ideas and budgets and finances and programs in our city. So stay tuned for more ways that we can all collaborate. Let's see, Roger Pence. What are the current estimates on the budgetary impacts due to COVID-19? What programs, projects you propose cutting? What practices you might propose increasing? So I've already mentioned, I think, most of those things on the hiring freeze, non-essential projects. We've saved 1.5 million. Again, we're also looking just not beyond 2021. We're actually projecting out 5 years. We know that this is not just going to be a short-term impact. This is going to be a long-term impact. So I should also add that. Let's see, from Diane Talmadge, why does the city need to spend our tax dollars on guaranteeing loans to both the senior center and now the ECA? It's really unclear why, given financial crisis, we need to risk city funds at all. Either of these, a taxpayer-funded PPP is meant to support small businesses. like Dominion Evans right now, rather than entities like the ECA, which has not been able to make its own ever and has caused nothing but financial problems for the Evans budget. I think first and foremost, the Senior Center and the ECA provide a vital community. They're a part of our community, and we have decided long before COVID-19 that they are a community asset, and that we as a city, we're going to support them as a community asset. So when those loans were issued, and I want to emphasize these are loans, not grants, but the idea is they are repaying these loans, and they're paying with interest. And it's important that, for example, when we do have that senior center completed and built, it's going to be a place for our seniors to gather in small groups and to have a place to get together, and it's important. It's important for our community. Additionally, let's see. Okay, so I think that's all I have, and let me hang here. I think there was something about Sunset. I can't find out where it was because that came in too late. But I can tell you about Sunset Avenue. Right now, again, primary purpose here is to make sure folks are safe. And in fact, as we see, it's great that we're having more, the state parks are sort of opening up. I think that will kind of relieve the pressures to have people just focus on local parks. However, I think the demand for folks who are walking is only going to increase as the weather gets nicer. And so at this time, I don't see any, in the short term, I don't think we're going to be closing Sunset Avenue. I think, but again, it is temporary. And so as things change, we may or may not, but right now it's going to remain closed. So with that, I'm going to turn over to the emails that I'm getting forward questions from all of you on this little tablet thingy here. So this is a safe way. Nobody's handing me anything. So I'm now going to look and just check out our, here we go, question. So from Evan Nelson, is there a plan to install sanitizer stations and portable washing stations downtown to help businesses to reopen when the state home state is listed? Yeah, and these are, yes. So we're going to be looking at ways that we can, of course, make sure it's a safe unit. I think the portable hand washing stations are a rare item right now. So it's going to be kind of rare, but I think whether we install hand sanitizers, whatever we do, we're going to make sure that we want it to be a safe experience. And I think that kind of leads to a broader question about our downtown. We have a lot of restaurants in our downtown. We have a lot of storefronts in our downtown. They're small places. If we have to have, and we're seeing that in other states where they're having to, for example, restaurants are having to limit their capacity to 50%. Restaurants might not be able to survive if they only have 50% seating capacity inside. So what if we open up some of our streets or close them to vehicles and open up to pedestrians? What if we have, the rest of the storefronts move out front onto the sidewalks? The restaurants had seating and tables outside into the streets, and we have a broader area to comply with social distancing that allows some of these restaurants to stay open. We try it on the weekends, maybe on the evenings. These are the kind of ideas that our recovery task force is looking at. So I just want to kind of share that as an example. Has Edmonds businesses reached out? It's a two-part question, sorry. Has Edmonds businesses reached out to Scratch Distillery or other businesses to see about producing large supplies of sanitizer to support a business when they reopen? So currently, the city of Edmonds has purchased already from Scratch Distillery, and also, as I understand, Salish Brewery has been providing some of that raw materials to Scratch, and then they're producing the sanitizer. So we've actually purchased that already from them, and we've actually distributed that to our first responders, and we have a stockpile of, a big stockpile, but a stockpile of that. So, and we're always on the prowl looking for hand sanitizers. I think everyone's gonna need it for a very long while. So open to those ideas, absolutely, and to continue doing that. Okay, next question here. When will the parks reopen? So I sort of already mentioned all of our parks are open except for the Marina Beach area where we have blocked off, and so we're looking at potentially opening that sometime after May 5th. So we'll look into that as far as those parking lots reopening those. Okay, elaborate more on the outside restaurants. So, this idea is what we know is, and the reason you hear a lot about outdoor recreation right now is being outside is a probably it's always going to be a ideal place in terms of fresh air, and in terms of, it's much better than being in a closed space. So the idea behind this, outside restaurants is, we would close a block or two or three, and we would try this out, just like we're going to try out our farmers market. The same sort of idea that we'll mark it off. We'll using a lot of paint, or we're going to have all kinds of paint on our friggin' sidewalks. They're going to be, all these different markings and pacings and areas, and maybe we're going to use ropes and to cordon off certain areas. But essentially, we're going to have, just like you see a little bit of dining on the sidewalks, right? During the summertime, you would see it literally come out into the streets. And so that is the sort of the thinking behind that. And it could be like in the afternoon to the evening only. So that way you're still having people be able to go there during the daytime. But that's an idea. I'd like to know what you all think, if you like that, if you don't like that, if you have concerns. Okay, let's see here. What about the streets and other restaurants feel this is bowl-centric? Good point. Happy to consider these things at other places. If there's a safe way we can do it, I'm happy to explore that. If around Five Corners, somewhere off of I don't think we don't close Highway 99, but if there are places around Highway 99, happy to explore that. So yes, it's not limited. It's wherever our community is gathering. If it does make sense to expand out to some parking lots or roads, let's think about that. Yeah. Now that Zoom's for commission meeting, now that we have Zoom, when will we restart commissions and board using Zoom? What did we do before Zoom, right? Yes, great question. I think that having Zooms are, there's pros and there's cons. I think, right, the con is you can't be with me and I can't be with you. And so we have to talk to cameras, which is very frustrating on many levels. And so it's also very hard for you, the public, to be involved and being informed and also interact. So when we think about commission meetings, I think the same sort of challenges are going to be in place. For example, our city council meetings, because there is an acknowledgement that the public does have harder ways to interact and to be informed and be involved, the governor's proclamation limits the type of city business that we can do during these city council meetings. So that's one of the challenges with having sort of these board and commission meetings, where if we can't have the same public interactivity, it's going to probably limit the kind of business that we can conduct at these boards and commissions. So I think that if we do roll these back out, they're going to have to be limited to what the kinds of topics they can consider. So for example, our city council meetings are pretty much limited to COVID-19 related things, as well as sort of the business to sort of keep the light on, if you will. Mask enforcement for day laborers, they are coughing and hacking, and it makes people mad. We're definitely, we want, so I can tell you at our city, we're going to be issuing masks to all of our city employees. There's going to be cotton masks, because as like everybody's experiencing, there's PPE, personal protective equipment shortages. So we want something that you can have for yourself, that you can clean on a regular basis. So looking at mask enforcement, I think everybody will need to have masks as we start to go back out there. And that's something we're all going to have to enforce. I don't want to say it's just going to be limited to someone or just to police or just to whatever. I think we're all going to have to be policing ourselves and policing others to make sure that we're having our masks to keep people safe. But I'm open to how that will work, and that goes back to more reopening. Where are we going to require masks? Where are we not? And I think those are all good questions to be asking right now. Tables outdoors, maybe reducing parking lots to move tables outdoors for greater physical separation and fewer people present at any one time is the way to go. And that's with an exclamation point. So that wasn't a question, it was a statement. No problem. Okay, thank you for that. So there's a fan of that. All right. Says masks in grocery stores. Are we still using masks in our grocery stores? Still going to require their personnel to wear them? So the CDC's guidance is to basically wear a mask if you can't maintain social distancing. And so obviously in a place like a grocery store, is really hard to maintain social distancing. I know they're limiting, sometimes they'll limit, how people are lined up, and they have the sneeze guards, and there's all these different things in place. But as far as, are we going to require folks to wear them in the grocery stores? I'll look into guidance on that and get back to you. What are experts telling you about how long we may be using social distancing? Social distancing, which is a concept I don't think any of us really, followed or knew of, is pretty much going to be with us for a long time. And I think that on the one hand, it's an adjustment for all of us, and it is frustrating, I think, for all of us. But it's also going to make us a lot safer community in the long run. And so there's some, I think the hard reality of it is we have a virus, there is no known cure. We have no vaccine for it. And the only reason it is disappearing is because we're all at home. And the minute we start going back out, and we've seen this in places that are doing this, that it's having, we're seeing those numbers go back up again. We're receiving those impacts. And so we want to make sure that those numbers are manageable. And that's why we're waiting for guidance from the governor's office. And, I think a lot of times you hear this contact, what is, contact tracing? And it's the kind of thing that happened really early on. So when this COVID-19 outbreak began in Snohomish County, as soon as they had one case, they contacted that person, the person that was in their family, and then everybody that person had been in contact with, and they isolated all those people. And that is how you effectively do. That's effectively how you try to contain a virus. But as this thing became so prevalent in the community, they no longer had the resources to do that. And it basically spread to the point where it was no longer contained. So the governor has proposed hiring 1,500 people. I believe 700 of them are National Guards, what he mentioned at his press conference. And the idea with health district folks and other folks out there that we're going to, when we go back out there, that if these things start to come up again, we're going to be able to isolate them and contain them. And so that's real important that we have those things in place first. And once we have those things in place, but social distancing, until there's a cure and everything else, I think this is going to be here for a long time, unfortunately. How would you reopen a parking lot? What would that look like with social distancing? Well, again, space is going to be the commodity, and a parking lot, just at first blush, every other car. We don't want a place where, or we're limiting sort of how many cars are going in at any one time. It's going to be limiting the flow of traffic. Those are all things we're just going to have to think about. I mean, obviously not everybody's parking at the same time and everybody's not getting out or in and out of their cars at the same time. So those are the kinds of good questions and things we have to think through. What about the dog park? Oh yes, the dog park. My dog needs exercise too, so I hear you on that one. And mine's 165 pounds. You don't want him at the dog park. I think that we need to think about this. I think this is, I think if all the dogs were well behaved, that'd be great. But I know that, it's dogs starts fighting and the owners run together, and next thing you know, now you have all these owners together trying to separate them. So then of course you have a lot of people coming into one place, in and out a lot. So I think we're going to have to think about that a little bit. So I don't have an answer yet, but we'll definitely study that. And as soon as we can open that safely, I'd be supportive of it. But I want to make sure that we can do it in a safe way. Oh, I'm getting backed up here. We got like a bunch of questions. All right. Summer market. With social distancing in the summer market, will the hours be extended? And public restrooms reopen? So I don't know about the summer hours being extended. I know that it's going to be for a set amount of time. There will not be public restrooms open at this time. The health district has some very specific guidance here. You can get it on their website. Operation guidelines for farmers markets. And so they really are the ones that have, for example, no open ready-to-eat food. Food must be either packaged or placed in to-go containers, no seating or on-site dining. So they have very clear guidance. So something like, restrooms and other things, these are places where people are going to congregate and they're going to hang out. And really the idea behind this is really You go in, you get your food, you purchase your food, and you leave just like a grocery store. It's like an outdoor grocery store. So it's the same idea. Unfortunately, it is not going to be a place to hang out. And so I don't think at this time restrooms are going to be reopened because of that. Let's see. What are contemplated as resources for contact tracing? What is the timeline for implementation? You mentioned that people are voluntary compliance. So just staying home. Do we not need to comply? Okay. So what are contemplated resources? So when I say resources for contact tracing, that means two things. That means people and funding for those people. So funding for those people. It also means testing. It means testing, a significant amount of testing. So it's one thing to contact people. We have to actually confirm they have the thing. So we have to test them. We have to test the people they're in contact with. And then we have to isolate them, quarantine for 14 days. So that's what we mean by sort of the contact tracing, and the resources is people and money to provide that. The time of implementation. So the governor had mentioned that he hopes to have this hiring of 1,500 people by around May 11th. So I think that's a target date, but I would look to the governor's office as far as any more specifics as far as that. It says, you mentioned that people are voluntary compliance, so just staying home, do we not need to comply? What I mean is that this works by voluntary compliance. Yes, it is a stay-at-home order, but this is a law that is really only works if we don't have the resources to go out there and contact everybody, nor do we want to be running around contacting everybody to making sure they're in compliance. This works because you are all complying on your own, that you are choosing to do this when no one else is looking, you're doing the right thing. And that's what we mean by voluntary compliance. And that's why this is working, because you are doing this without having someone to look over your shoulder or tell you to do it, because you are actually have listened to the instructions and the order and are complying, and that's wonderful, and that's why this is working, and hopefully we'll continue to work with your cooperation. Are summer events canceled? Are some summer events canceled? Thing of 4th of July, U.S. pool, concerts in the park. So let me speak to the Parks Department. We are right now looking, the Parks Directors has been in consultation with me about some of the events that we have scheduled, and generally speaking, yes, large gathering events are not going to be opening anytime soon. I've not heard any indication from the medical community that that's something's going to be opening. So I'd say the presumption is that large scale type of events will be canceled for this year. That's my sort of gut, if you will, based on that. I can't say for certain. I don't have any specific insight, but just looking at as far as how they reopen things in the gradual part of this. And I should just sort of add, this sort of leads to the other thing. It's like, we're opening up construction, we're opening up parks, and there's going to be a pause. And we're going to see, is there an uptick? Is their numbers are continuing to drop? But each time there's a reopening, there's going to be a pause period where the health community is going to see, are there any changes in numbers? Because we all know it takes a while. It takes anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks before you start seeing the changes in numbers. And so we want to make sure that as we're reopening, that we're not seeing those numbers go back up, because that may change also what's reopened and the timing of those reopenings. But I hope to have some answers for you all as far as things like Yost Park, concerts in the park later in the week. I think that the concert parks is an interesting idea. I've heard about this from some others who look at ways that we can do things in a safer way. And maybe it's not concerts in one location. Maybe we do neighborhood concerts. Maybe you, as a neighborhood or a street, hire a block party and you hire someone to come perform to a small group of, let's say, 25 people or 50 people. And so depending what those numbers and guidance we get from the Health District, maybe we have these smaller venues that are throughout our community throughout the summer, as opposed to everybody going to one location. So it's that kind of thinking we're going to have to do, and creativity. We've been seeing a lot of this creativity, and I think it's only going to see more of that as it comes. So stay tuned for ways that we can keep Edmonds in that way, okay? Trolley, it'll be difficult to social distancing on the new trolley. Does this suggest we should put the trolley on hold? Great question. I think as a matter of course, just because of the nature of what projects are necessary right now and things like that. So the trolley is definitely on hold right now. Of course, we want to make sure that we encourage people to come when it's safe, that we have people come to visit Edmonds when it's safe to do so. So I wouldn't say the trolley is done, but it's definitely on hold. And so, we'll continue to look at that viability of that as we move forward. What other streets did you shut down in Edmonds at this time besides, what streets are shut down in Edmonds at this time besides Sunset? So there are no streets shut down besides Sunset. When we're talking about shutting down streets, that was having to do with the restaurants. Many cities now are looking at providing closures to streets to provide more places for people to walk. And I think you see that, I saw that today. There are people, our sidewalks are not big enough to do social distancing. So people are two people, a bunch of people approaching each other, and one goes into the street and the other one is staying on the sidewalk. So we're having a problem maintaining social distancing. We have people walking in the street. We had that a lot happen on Sunset, which is why we decided to close that. Do we need to provide more places for folks to walk safely? If there's a corridor or a way to do that where there's not much vehicle traffic and we can have more places for people to walk safely, I'm open to those ideas. But right now, the only place is Sunset that has been closed. Okay, all right. Temporary signs downtown. Can you install temporary signs in the downtown area to remind people to walk in the direction opposite to the vehicle flow? This would minimize the number of pedestrians crisscrossing the road to avoid other pedestrians. Okay, so you're saying like basically one-way signs. So maybe on one side of the street, people walk one way, on the other side of the street, people walk that way. We'll look into that and think about that. I think that's the kind of thinking we're just going to have to do, and so it's something we'll definitely consider. What will the CARES grant be used for specifically? So the CARES grant can be used specifically for disaster related expenses, things that are impacted by the disaster. There's a lot of criteria, and there's a lot of things. It has to be connected obviously to COVID-19. And so some places, so for example, where the city has made expenditures for COVID related expenses, the city those expenses could be covered. There could be opportunities where the city could give directly to those who have been impacted by COVID-19. So maybe there's specific criteria. I know there's specific criteria for grants for small businesses. Because of the government closures, these businesses might receive some sort of grant. So we might be able to issue those grants, for example. So we hope to have more specifics. Like I said, we just got this announced today. We don't have the details. We're not going to get, the legislature automatically, because of the law, there's a 10-day hold. So during these 10 days, we'll be looking at specifically all those options, and we'll let you know as soon as we know what we're allowed to use those for. Let's see, I was hoping we can find that the number of households. Oh wait, hang on, that's not a question. That's from just an email for the city council meeting tonight. So anyway, let's see. Francis Ann Center, events, pickleball, look at that, etc. When can these reopen? Yes, Francis Ann pickleball is a very, 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 very popular thing at Francis Ann Center. And I understand the pickleball players take it very seriously. I've seen you in action. And yes, we're looking into that, and we'll be talking about that. I think in general, we have a challenge of sporting events in confined spaces, in those kinds of environments. So we're going to look into that. But again, we're taking our direction from the health district, from the state health officials. So as we get more guidance regarding those events, we'll let you know. Right now, we don't have any guidance about those. So the minute I get some, we'll share them with everyone. Okay, so I know there was a lot, and I think I was trying to read. I got a lot of questions. I want to make sure I got them all, and I talked fast. So, hey, I apologize I'll try to be slower next time we do this. And but I do want to really thank you for taking the time. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. I want to let you know that how much I care, that you care about our city. That really makes it our job, all of us, our job so easier when we know so many people out there are all chipping in. And that's really why our city is really shining. You know, I've heard from some of our small business owners who tell me that, you know, if my business was in Seattle, I would have had to shut down already. But because, you know, my restaurant is in Edmonds and I've gotten so much support from Edmonds residents, it has made all the difference. And conversely, I've seen our Edmonds businesses chip in and do things that, you know, go above and beyond, whether they're delivering food to our healthcare providers at Swedish Hospital, they're delivering food to school children, you know, our breweries, our distilleries are making hand sanitizers. I mean, who thought that they could do that? I didn't know they could do that, right? We got some right here. Here's some of our hand sanitizer. But these kinds of things, of this sort of community kind of commitment, is why I know we're going to get through this together. And I just thank you from the bottom of my heart. Keep doing what you're doing. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I look forward to chatting with you all very soon.